I'm not sure what to call this. A couple of years ago, I started doing a podcast, and after about a year, I kind of stopped. Simultaneously, I've been trying to get a handle on video for many years, and I recently decided the only way I was going to go about the only way I was going to accomplish this was to just jump in. So I guess this is kind of a vlog podcast test thing. I don't have a concrete handle on the format. Things like intros and outros, lighting, graphics, that kind of thing. I haven't really figured it out. But I'm just going to give this a shot and work out the details as I go, because I think that's the only way I'm going to actually get any practice going with this. With that out of the way, this specific video is partly a rant and partly an open question. I'm hoping that maybe somebody can explain what I'm missing, if I am in fact missing something. When it comes to audio recording, I'm pretty much a noob. I do I've done and I'm still working on doing the normal thing of Google searching and trying to read and watch video from reliable, reputable sources to get a good understanding of what's going on. But I'm not really there, and I don't have a ton of practical experience with it. But today I want to talk about two lines of reasoning that I keep seeing repeated over and over regarding using your camera to record sound. Now, I want to state right out here, I don't have a dog in this fight, so to speak. I have audio recorders. In fact, I'm using one for this video. I don't have a vested interest in proving that cameras are good or disproving audio recorders or cameras or something like that. Like, for me, what's more important is having a sound, fact-based understanding of the processes involved and the capabilities so I can make informed decisions in the field for myself. With that said, let's dig into the bits of advice that I'm questioning. In my searches about audio and video recording, one point comes up over and over. Don't use your DSLR's mic input to record sound. Use a separate dedicated recorder. Now, obviously, you don't want to use the mic on a camera. It's just not going to even come close to an actual external microphone. What we're talking about is the 1/8 inch or 3.5 millimeter jack on the side of the camera that lets you plug in an external microphone. Now, when giving this advice, most presenters go on to give a host of reasons that you should follow it, and almost invariably two come up over and over again. These are, first, that the camera's mic preamps are just crap, and second, that cameras can only record 16-bit files, not 24-bit ones. So let's start with the first point. Simply put, there's a lot of people saying this, but what I can't find is any underlying testing to support the claim. I can't say that people making the claim are wrong, but on the other hand, I also can't say that they're right. I simply can't find any data to support it. Personally, I find the argument a little hard to believe. Bearing in mind, the light captured by the image sensor has to go through a similar process as sound does coming in through the mic input. You have a really small voltage signal, in the case of the image sensor, it's way smaller than the microphone, that is amplified into a stronger signal and then converted into a digital signal with an analog to digital converter. So now, I'm supposed to believe that Canon and Nikon and Sony and everyone else who builds digital camera sensors can design the analog circuits for their camera sensor that can operate in the megahertz range to, read out the sensor fast enough to provide, like video. But they can't do the same thing for sound when the circuit only would have to work at tens of kilohertz. But on the other hand, companies like Zoom and Tascam and all the other companies that make audio recorders, They can do this thing that's completely impossible, or at least not within the interest range, of camera companies that are building much more complicated electronics than the audio companies. See, that just doesn't seem reasonable to me. Now, I could go on. There's a lot of other sort of arguments that I could make that are parallels, but, since I don't have hard data either, I don't really see a point in sort of belaboring the issue. But when push comes to shove, what I'd like to see is data. Either support the claim or not. If nobody can come up with something meaningful, though, I think maybe we should stop telling people their camera's preamps suck. Because we just don't know. We're just parroting conventional wisdom. And conventional wisdom isn't always right. Besides, there are plenty of good arguments that can be made to support using an external recorder anyway. Probably better ones. Like, you can use better microphones because it provides XLR phantom power. Or the interface is better designed for, working and recording sound. It just... weak arguments that sound technical seem worse to me than the user interface argument. Even though it isn't technical, it's something you have to interact with, and that, to me, makes it a lot more relevant. My second point of contention is bit depth, and this comes up a lot, too. Now, we should know, or at least I know, from digital photography and pretty much all digital conversion, that the bit depth of the file or the analog digital controller controls the dynamic range that can be recorded. I mean, it's not really any different than in still photography. Okay, there is a difference, but it's mostly in the terminology being used. The overreaching point is the same. So in photography, we would say something like a 14-bit sensor, we use stops, and we would say something like a 14-bit sensor has 14 stops, or could potentially have 14 stops of dynamic range, or a 14-bit file can store 14 stops of dynamic range. In the audio world, they use decibels. Incidentally, if you want to translate stops to decibels, 6 decibels is 1 stop. I think where part of this gets confusing to people, at least it gets confusing to me, is that audio people don't use just 1 decibel scale. But even then, the increment, 1 decibel, is the same size step regardless of the scale. So in a way, it's a lot like Kelvin and Celsius in temperature. The scales are different. 0 is in different places. But each unit is the same change in temperature. So anyway, the argument goes something like this. A 16-bit file has a dynamic range of 96 decibels, while a 24-bit file has a dynamic range of 144 decibels. That's 256 times more range. Of course, then you get the direct implication that this added range is really important. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't be arguing that cameras are crap because they don't support 24-bit audio. The problem I have here is the same problem I have with so many photographers talking about dynamic range in their cameras. Ultimately, the dynamic range of a scene is dictated by the scene itself. Having a camera with more dynamic range doesn't get you more if the scene doesn't have that much dynamic range in the first place. So with that said, let's talk about sound for a bit, because that's the scene we need to talk about, and we need to understand the range of the sound scene. If we want to talk about how loud sound is in the world, we're usually talking about the dB/SPL scale. On that scale, 0 dB/SPL is the nominal threshold for human hearing. Yeah, okay, there might be some people whose hearing's a little better that can hear a little bit lower, but that's the normal, the average that the scale uses. So on that scale, A quiet library is around 40 dB. A typical conversation is around 60 dB. The threshold for discomfort is 120 dB, and the threshold for pain is 130 dB. Moreover, depending on the source, anything above about 90 dB can cause hearing damage depending on your exposure to the sound. So let's look at a practical example of something in practice. I know from where I'm sitting, right here, the way I've adjusted my mic, the way I've adjusted my mic levels to when I'm speaking, my voice is about 30 dB louder than the noise floor. Moreover, I'm using a pretty standard recording practice of keeping my voice around 12 dB below the clipping point on my recorder. So I have a further 12 dB of headroom that I have to account for if I'm adding up the dynamic range. So that gives me a total range of 42 dB, from the loudest sound my recorder where it clips to the quietest sound that gets lost in the room's noise floor. A 16-bit file provides 96 dB of range, though. That's more than twice the range that I can reasonably get out of my environment. I can't record quieter sounds. The noise floor prevents that. I could certainly adjust the gain so there's more headroom, but I'm recording myself talking. I don't plan to intersperse that with screaming and shooting off of fireworks, so more headroom just lowers the signal-to-noise ratio of the normal sound. Okay, sure, I could try to lower the noise floor in here. I mean, I already turn off all the fans that I can, so, there's that. But even then, there's a limit to how low the noise floor can go. A good quality TV studio, for example, will have a noise floor around 20 dB, and those are really expensive to build. Even then, that takes my range of 42 dB here to 62 dB, which is still short of 96 dB. I'm pretty certain that I could never get a reasonable room down to 0 dB. You could do it in an anechoic chamber, but would you really want to work and record in an anechoic chamber? There's no ambience. It's just dead. But even if I could get my room down to 0 dB, the total range that I'd be recording is still only 82 dB, and that's still less than 96. Simply put, I don't see 16 bits as being a real limiting factor. And I'm having a hard time figuring out how often I'd want to record a range that's essentially from the quietest sound discernible to a human to a jet plane taking off, which is the range of a 24-bit file. Then again, maybe I'm missing something. I am a noob at this. I don't profess to have all the answers. But it seems to me that not having 24-bit files isn't a detriment per se. I mean, sure, it could be in some circumstances. There could be times where you want to have or you need to have that extra range because, something really loud's happening and you need to be able to record that in addition to the silent, quieter things. But I think also in those cases, the noise floor is going to be higher. And while I wouldn't say, okay, well, you can use 16 bits or use 16 bits for everything, a lot of this comes down to trade-offs. Recording with an external recorder, even if it has better preamps and you're using better microphones and it has phantom power and XLR and all of this stuff, it comes with downsides. You got to have extra media, so you're now carrying about two SD cards or two storage cards. You got to have batteries for it that are not the batteries in your camera. They can go dead and your camera could still work, and then you've got that. And when everything is all said and done, you have to sync the two files. Now, granted, there's software ways to do that. There's hardware ways to do that. There's time codes. There's a lot of ways to sync two-system audio. But it's still something that has to be done, and that makes it another hoop to jump through. And again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't use it. I'm using it right now to record this video. But I think if we're going to make an argument that you should do something or you shouldn't do something, that argument should be made in a way that gives people the information to be able to go out and make an informed decision. And I don't see that information coming through here. It just seems to me like there's a lot of do this because that's how we say to do it and that's how we've always done it, or something to that effect. I don't know. Like I said, maybe I'm completely off in the woods somewhere and there really is an important reason to do, do things the way with two-system audio. I don't know. I'd certainly welcome some answers. If somebody has them, like, that would be great. I really would like to see an article that shows some actual testing of the camera audio input capabilities compared to like field recorders, especially the inexpensive field recorders like the Tascam DR60 that I'm using or the Zoom H4n. I've read a lot of people who say those are crap and you shouldn't use them. You should get something better. And, if you're saying that about the field recorder that everybody's being told to upgrade from their camera to, what does that really say about that? Anyway, that's some food for thought. And I think I'm going to try and do these kind of vlog casts a little more often. I don't know. We'll see. Until next time.